All right. So you mentioned that I've been the supervisor of assessments in Kane County for 20 years now. I'm at the end of my 5th term. I wasn't always in this job. In fact, this is my first government paid job. I didn't start out in government. I started out as a real estate appraiser 41 years ago. The principal focus of my practice was litigation. I did a lot of valuation of properties for court testimony. And then in 2004, I joined the Kane County Board of Review. Yes, I did do some volunteer roles in St. Charles before that. And then in 2006, my first government job, it was Kane County Supervisor of Assessments. My daughter was in kindergarten, and my predecessor was retiring, and so I agreed to take the appointment at that time because I wanted to be a room dad over at Munhall Elementary School, where my daughter was going at the time. She's, of course, now grown up and 24, and she now is in Florida working for a large cartoon mouse. I have done a number of other things. I am a continuing education instructor. I've been doing that for 12 years. I've had some leadership positions in some large organizations. I'm a past president of the Illinois chapter of the International Association of Assessing Officers. I am the current president of the County Assessment Officers Association of Illinois, and I am the vice president of the Illinois Association of County Officials. Now, at this point, at least one person in this room is thinking, well, that's all very interesting, but what are we going to learn about property taxes? So let's start right off. Where do property taxes go? So I like to start with asking this question. When you know the answer, shout it out. Where is the biggest user? Schools. You're absolutely right. Who can tell me how much of your tax bill goes to schools? I hear 61%, 70%. It's going to vary depending on where you are and what taxing districts. For instance, if you live outside of a municipality, you don't have that layer there, so it's going to be a larger percent. But overall, in the aggregate, 67% of all our property. Yes, you were very close.
What you said about not living in the...
Okay, so let's say you live in St. Charles. You have this slice of the pie up here because you're paying into St. Charles and you're paying into schools. But if this wasn't there, the pie would shift and the percentages would be a little bit different. So you wouldn't pay more dollars, but it'd be a higher percentage. So we have 2/3 of your tax dollars in Kane County go to schools. About another 10 to 11% go to municipalities. Almost 6% go to the Forest Preserve District and Park Districts. The rest of it is about 16%. None of those other ones take more than 4%. So you have over on the side, the county takes about 3.5%, libraries take about 3.5%, fire districts about 3.5%, townships at the low end 2.5%, then the other small random districts that don't have a specific classification about a little over 3%. So how does that stack up statewide? Is Kane County normal or abnormal? So do you think other counties pay more for schools or less than for schools? What do you think? I'm hearing mostly less, and you're right. Statewide, schools count for about 62%, whereas we're at 67%. Now here's the interesting thing here. Cities account for almost 20% statewide. But in Kane County, they only count for about 11%. Now, part of that is going to be that we have park districts and fire districts that don't always happen downstate. So they may have a parks department, so that would be wrapped up in the cities. But the biggest difference here is that our schools are funded more by property taxes than in most areas of the state. By the way, the county with the highest percent going to property taxes for schools, highest percent going to schools, Kendall. So, and that changes a little bit every year, but I try to keep track of those statistics. But in addition to knowing where your property taxes go, people want to know, why did my property tax bill go up? Anybody here because their property tax bill went down, you want to see them jacked up again? Okay, I've never had anyone say, please tax me more. So I appreciate that. But why did your property taxes go up? Well, it's complex. There's a lot of math involved, and there's a multitude of reasons it could be. So let's go over the most common one. The most common one is government spending went up. There's no sugarcoating of that fact. Now, I'm not here to tell you that government spent too much or too little, or like Baby Bear, just right. I think you're all smart enough to decide that for yourself. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, when you hear people sugarcoating these things, they say things like, we're going to ask you to contribute a little more towards your government. I always bristle at that phrase because contribute is what you do at your church. Contribute is what you do when you're going by the Salvation Army red kettle at Christmas time. Contribute is what you do to charity. If you don't pay your taxes, can you say, I decline to contribute? Are bad things going to happen? Yeah, they will. Now, I'm not going to tell you that they're taking too much, too little, or just right, but I'm going to call it what it is. It is a tax, and it means it has to be paid, for better or for worse. And government spending is one of the reasons. In fact, if you want to see what government spent last year and this year, look at this pamphlet. This pamphlet's hot off the presses, brand new this month. Go right to the center. You can see every municipality and every school district, and also in paragraph form, there's Kane counties. See what their tax extension was, their overall levy that was paid by taxpayers last year, and you can see which one is there this year. And you can see, okay, I'm going to answer this one, but after this, we're going to take questions at the end because I want to finish on time. I will stay here to answer all the questions, but often I'm going to cover all these things here. On the terms of budgets, all this compares is what they levied last year to this year. It doesn't talk about their budgets because we don't get that at the county. All these taxing districts, the municipalities, the schools, they do this all themselves. Kane County does not have any authority to tell them what they can levy and what they can't. That doesn't mean there aren't rules, just we're not the enforcer for those. But if you have questions about there, the phone number of each one of these institutions is there. It is always okay to ask questions. Don't ever let somebody make you feel bad for asking a question about the taxes that you pay. It is always okay to do that. So that's one of the reasons that taxes go up. It is not, however, the only reason. Another reason is that your property's taxable value, so what I mean by taxable value, the assessed value of your property minus any exemptions you get. And we're going to cover exemptions in detail a little bit later, but your assessed value minus your exemptions is what the tax rate is based on. Your tax rate, your taxable value might have gone up at a faster pace than some other properties for several reasons. For instance, some properties are granted homestead exemptions. We're going to cover all the various exemptions there, but there's one truth, one mathematical truth to this. None of those exemptions result in government getting less money if they're given out or giving more money by taking it back. All that means is the amount of money that is being levied by each of these local governments gets spread over a larger or smaller group of properties for a tax base. If you get an exemption, that means that other people are going to be paid a little bit more. Now, and sometimes the exemption is small and the amount is negligible across all properties. But sometimes exemptions are very large, and that will at some point produce a noticeable change. In addition to homestead exemptions, some properties are granted non-homestead exemptions. This is not for residential property occupied by their owners, but it's for special categories such as property of governments or property that is used for, and these are all set out in Article 9, Section 6 of the Illinois Constitution. They're set for agricultural or horticultural societies, Schools, and there we mean schools that are not government institutions, but private schools that would take some of the burden off of the government schools. Religious and cemetery purposes, and by the way, I lump those together only because the statute does, and charitable purposes. Notice I didn't say nonprofit. There is no such thing as a property tax exemption in Illinois for nonprofit. It's for institutions of public charity. So how much does that affect it? How much gets dropped out of the tax base and increases the amount everyone else pays? Let's look at it visually. This is a picture of Central Kane County. So this is Blackberry Township here. This is Geneva Township in the city over here, Batavia in the city over here. Let's look and see how many properties are removed from the tax rolls altogether. And we're not talking about homeowner exemptions, from one of those other exemptions. Everything shaded there in a blue, those are no longer on the tax rolls. Everything else, everyone else is paying to account for those. And there are other things about that too. For instance, there's a special property tax treatment for private golf courses. I can't golf on them, you can't golf on them unless you're a member, but they still get special property tax treatment and everybody else pays up the difference. As long as that's the system set up, that's the math of how it works. The last difference for why your property taxes may have gone up was the rate of value change varies both by location and by property type. Now, who here has lived who lived here and owned real estate in Illinois in the 80s? It gets smaller each time, but a lot of you. So you remember what happened in the 80s. We came out of that recession, interest rates went way down and property values shot up. That's actually what led to the property tax cap law. But one of the things we noticed was that didn't happen everywhere. I grew up downstate in a small factory and mining town that was bleeding population. When my dad died in 1977, our house, which was a nice house, was appraised for $79,000 for the estate. In 2004, my mom sold it, and over those decades, it went from $79,000 all the way to $89,000. No, that did not keep up with the rate of inflation. Well, what it meant, I was in a town that was seeing 2 3-shift factories that went down to one shift factory, and now it's no factories at all. And we saw a lot more houses than there are demand. If we're in an area where there's more demand for houses than there are houses, that's what makes those prices go up. But it doesn't make everything go up. Let's think, can we think of a category that used to be thriving and, gosh, I don't know, anything nearby? How many of you guys go hang out at the mall these days? Okay. Oh, Bill, really? I was going to say, you're one of those urban explorers who break in and take pictures and put them on YouTube? Okay. All right, so if you see what happens to regional malls, they're tanking. They have not held their value. So even if property values for homes are increasing, but those are just staying the same, not declining, that shifts the burden of property taxes. So that's another way those changes can happen. But on top of that, let's look at tax rates. So the question is, how are our tax rates determined? We have on the tax bill, we see a value and we see a tax rate. Is it just applying a rate at random? Where does that come from? So let's look at this specifically and look at the players. For starters, the state legislature makes the rules. So I see Don standing there in the back. Don't see Dan, he might have stepped out for a minute to take a phone call. I don't blame him. He's earned it. So the legislature is what makes the rules on property taxes. We can like them, we could hate them, but in Illinois, that's where it all starts. Next, each taxing body sets its own levy. So, see the County Board Vice Chair Bill Roth has joined us. Bill's in the back. You can wave to the people, Bill. So, Bill, how are we coming on the county budget? We got plenty of money? No. But we are the ones setting it. How are you doing on setting the school district's tax levies? You working on those? Right, we have nothing to do with that. So your school district has that. Right. Township assessors, we have township assessors in each of our 16 townships. They're the ones that set the initial values. The county supervisor of assessments, that's me. I equalize the values, and what equalization is a process to make sure that all the values have been set equitably across township lines. Let's say you have a county nearby us where we share a school district, like how the Elgin School District goes into Cook County. Does Cook County undervalue properties? They way undervalue properties. On average, in Kane County, we are at 33.33%. That is our 3-year level of assessment. Cook County is in the 8% level. Now, part of that is statute. They're supposed to be at 10%. But even then, they lower it to 8%. So what happens is equalization factors have to be applied. In Cook County, every single property value gets tripled every year after the county is all done. The last time the state made any adjustment here in Kane County was 1987. Now, just because they're correct on a macro basis doesn't necessarily mean they're correct on a micro basis. With 200,000 parcels, there's always a chance something didn't happen, even if the mass numbers look good. That's where the Board of Review comes in. The Board of Review hears and acts on assessment complaints. The county clerk is then going to receive the tax levies. If they have made any legal mistakes in their levying, they can revise those, but it's a very narrow process. And with that information all together, they're the ones that develop tax rates, and we're going to go over how in a minute. And then the unluckiest person in the whole process is whoever holds the role of county treasurer. The county treasurer has no ability to change a bill, can't set them, can't set the tax rates, can't set the assessments, but it's their name and phone number that goes on the bill. So let's look specifically at how this happens. We're going to start off. Tax rates start with local governments with a tentative budget. You're asking about budgets. That is kind of where the rubber meets the road, is those budgets. So each local government is going to set a tentative budget. Now, they may spend a lot of time working on this. Bill, about how many months a year does Kane County spend working on a budget?
Way too many.
Okay.
About 2 to 3. We're ahead of schedule.
That's when the county board gets it. People are working on that about 3 months before that. So, Don, how long did the city of St. Charles work on a budget when you were mayor?
6 months.
Okay, I think that's overall for everybody going through it is a problem. Yeah, the board, by the time the board gets it, maybe 2 or 3, but it's going to be 6 months out of everybody. So they've had a lot of people throwing in a lot of work, and then it comes time for the notice and public hearing. It's a great time. You, the public, get to talk about what you think about this budget. Now, my first question is, how many of you have ever attended a budget and levy hearing? 1. Okay, you guys don't count, you work for it. Okay, 1. That's normal. I've been in plenty of rooms this size where no one ever has. I've been in plenty of them because my job provides for that. And the most common thing that happens when the presiding officer, whether the chair or the mayor, gets up and says, do members of the public wish to offer any comment or ask any questions about the budget? What they hear is crickets. That's it. Now, there's an old adage. It's probably not true, but I get why it's there. It says that silence implies consent. And if you're one of those board members, you're an overworked school board member, you're not even paid for this. You're showing up, people have been working on this for 6 months, and they're giving you numbers that, gosh, there's a lot of stuff to support it, and nobody shows up. Can we really be too surprised that they didn't say, okay, and approve it? Now, I'm not suggesting you reenact the last scene in Frankenstein with pitchforks and torches, but it's okay to ask questions. Now, if you looked on your tax bill, you see all these things say, Mark, I can't possibly go to all those other meetings. You'd be right. You know what? The cemetery district that maybe has $15 on your bill, you can skip that one. Pay attention to that pie chart. What are the big ones for you? The school district, municipality, parks, Take a look at those. Start there. Talk to them about this. You can always ask questions. Now, when they're done, they approve that budget, and then you know what we get next? A second bite at the apple, because now they have to set their property tax levy. Not all of the budget comes from property taxes. There are a variety of sources of funding. There can be revenue sharing, there can be fees, there can be other things as well. But that property tax levy, we have a second time. And again, most often what we hear is crickets. At the end of that process, the county or the city or the school district are going to certify that levy to the county clerk. You know what we haven't seen at all there? Assessments. Because assessments are not part of the calculation. Assessments are not used to set budgets. They're for how the spending is divided up on a pro rata basis. So let's look at how spending is divided up. Now, what I'm going to show you is a cartoon that was in the Aurora Beacon News back in 2009. Hey, how many of you here are realtors? Okay, if you're realtors, you've seen this cartoon already or a version of it. The rest of you may not have. But it starts off how you see your house. And it looks like a nice little cozy cottage. I can see a basement window, so we know it has a basement. Looks like there's an upstairs, a 2-car garage. There's something flying over the top. Can't quite see what it is. It might be birds. It might be angels. We don't know. But it's a nice house. We like our houses. But we go to put them on the market. Our buyers don't always see our houses the same way we see them. So they think it's something less than impressive. Let's say you had a meeting of the minds. You were able to then arrive at a price, and you go to your lender, and your lender thinks it works like this. But of course, at the end of the process, your Kane County assessor thinks it looks like this. Now, this comes out in 2009. It's at the height of the Great Recession. I show this to my kid, she was 9 years old at this time, and she says, "Daddy, I think it's wonderful that you think every house is Cinderella's castle." And I said, "Honey, this was not meant to be a compliment." But it does highlight that there are some differences. There are some variances between the value that I would do as an assessor and the values that are placed on properties as an appraiser. For instance, regular maintenance is not considered in valuing houses for property tax purposes. So if you have a house with a roof at the end of its life like this one, it's going to be valued the same as a house like this one. Why do we do that? It's because the General Assembly has designed the system so the property tax code does not punish people who maintain their homes, and does not reward people who decline to do so. So what must property assessments be based on? Well, assessed values have to be based on 4 categories. Number 1, fair cash value. Fair cash value means the starting point. It means a willing buyer, a willing seller, neither one acting under duress, a reasonable marketing time for them, and it's expressed in terms of money. Next, after that, multiplied by 33.33%, except in Cook County. How many of you have ever owned property in Cook County? Okay, all you guys, take everything you learned about property taxes in Cook County, set it off to one side. The state has generally decided that Cook County gets its own set of rules that they have to follow, and we have to follow a different set of rules. And I will draw a veil of silence over my opinion of that. Third, all property valuations are a snapshot in time. There is a specific date. Our specific date is January 1st of the taxable year. So the tax bill that just came out about a month ago, that's the 2025 tax bill. That means when you saw fair cash value on that, that was for January 1st, 2025. And then the last thing is based on 3 prior years of sales. And that's probably where we get some of the biggest disconnect. I'm going to show you an example of this. How many of you follow the Case-Shiller Index? Okay, maybe a couple of you do. Case-Shiller is a national index, and they also have a Chicago version. I have both versions I'm going to display. And they track home sales not from one month to the next, but they look at this is what your home sold on this date, this is what it sold 20 years later, and then create an index based on those large amounts of data. The numbers from one month to the next can give you lots of false positives. And those of you who are realtors know, you like selling a house in December? No, nobody wants to be looking for a house. And the people who are, they absolutely need a house. You get false positives on when you include some of that data from one month to the next, say looking at medians. So what this is behind me is the Case-Shiller Index. January 1st of 2000 is 100. So we're right at this point here. We see it crossing the 100 threshold. Starts all the way back here on January 1st, 1990. It goes all the way here to January 1st, 2026. So that's not for the current tax bill. That's all the way to next year's tax bill. And we can see it every month that index point changes. But if we're going to look at the prior 3 years and overlay that, what kind of difference might we see? You can see this. You see it started off level. As it started to go up during the early part of the 2000s, it lagged behind. In 2008, it crossed over, and for a while, that 3-year level was above what people's 1-month property value was. And then it reverted to the other pattern. We can see it going up, but and using a lot of spikes, almost just jagged, but using a 3-year average provides a smooth transition, so we don't see property values jumping up, going down, and throwing out different numbers each year. Now that's the national market. Let's look at the Chicago market. We can see the same price index from January 1st of 1990 to January 1st, 2026. And let's overlay it. We don't see the larger swings that we did in the national market, but we're generally seeing the same type of trend. So all these things are going into assessments. And assessed values are for how spending is divided up. It starts again at the township level. All initial valuation happens at the township level. I like it that way. It works actually very well. Kane County has the second best coefficient of dispersion in the state. And if you're wondering, I don't know what that is, Mark, don't worry about it too much, but if you'd like to know, I'd be happy to explain it to you. We have the second best coefficient of concentration and the best price-related differential. Those are all statistical measures of equity that are analyzed by the Department of Revenue. Taking those three together using an equal weighting, we have the most uniform assessments overall in the state. Theoretically, Cook County should have the most because they have the most observations. Instead, Cook County is like 26th, and when you account for their population, they're something like 70th. It's not a very good situation, but that's a case where everything is consolidated at the township level. Everyone here is involved in their local market. Everyone here is around these neighborhoods. And that also means you have a township assessor that you can go to their office, never going to be more than 6 miles away from your house, that you can have a conversation with before any of those appeals start. That's how a lot of things get handled on an informal basis. The actual stuff that goes to Board of Review, for single-family homes, it's about 1/3 of 1% actually end up filing assessment complaints. In Cook County, it's about 33%. So in other words, it's about 900 times higher in Cook County, for better or for worse. It comes to my office for review and equalization. Change notices are mailed out if there was a change made by the township assessor. Board of Review will do hearings for any assessment complaints. And then finally, those values are all certified to the county clerk. Now, if you haven't completely fallen asleep in this conversation, and I'm sure there's at least 2 or 3 of you who haven't, you'd think, Mark, we haven't talked about tax rates yet, because this is what we're getting into. Tax rates are where the tax levies and the assessed values meet. It's the taxable or billable value of property divided by the tax levy dollars equals the rates. And then the treasurer applies those rates back onto the individual bills and mail them. So here's an example. In 2024, Kane County's real estate tax levy was a little over $61 million. The tax base, the rate setting value, was about $21.2 billion. If you divide the tax levy by the EAV, you are going to get a tax rate of 0.287842%. So that was a year ago. What happened this year? Well, the tax levy increased to $62.8 million. So we have a higher levy. But the tax base, the taxable value of property, went up to $23.3 billion. So one went up a little less than 2 million. One went up about $2 billion. And that means the tax rate was actually lower, even though the dollar amount is higher. So that's some of the complicated math that goes into all these calculations. But I'm looking out and I see people who are probably a little more practical than theoretical. And you're probably thinking, what if I think my assessment is too high? Well, there's some things you can do. First thing is make sure your property record is correct. Show of hands, who here has ever gone on to their township assessor's website, looked at the property information on that website and compared it to what you have on your home? Okay, looks like maybe 10% of you. Everyone else, you've got a homework assignment. I want you to go back to that middle page of the book and then turn one page later, and you're going to see websites of each of our 16 townships. You can also get to these information by going to this address on the pen, assessments.kanecountyil.gov. Select the Township Assessor tab. Go home, take a look at what information they have there for your property. If it seems to match, good to go. If it's not, give the Township Assessor a call. This is the easiest thing we can fix. Now, they're probably going to send somebody out to remeasure everything, because if one thing's wrong, there might be something else wrong. They want to see it all. But this is our chance to get this information and get it right. And every one of them wants to get it right. Second thing you can do, you can call your assessor with your concerns. Don, thank you. If you have concerns, you don't need to wait until you've got a notice. And you especially don't want to wait until you have a tax bill. Call them earlier. It's okay to have a conversation with your township assessor about your property's value at any time. When you wait until the time where there's a deadline approaching, the problem we end up with is, well, let's see, how many of you are in St. Charles Township? Just show of hands. Looks like the majority. Me too. This is where I lived. I've lived in St. Charles for 35 years. So we have about 20,000 tax parcels in Kane County. You know how many phone lines they have in at the township? 2. It gets filled up awful fast then. It's okay to ask questions off season. But let's say you're still not satisfied, and that's okay. You can always file an assessment complaint with the Board of Review. There are generally 4 bases for filing an assessment complaint. The most common one is overvaluation. That means I don't think my property is worth what you have it in there as the assessment. And most of the assessment complaints we get are made on that basis. The second one is an inequitable valuation. Let's say you have 5 properties exactly like yours, but your property is 20% higher. Well, there's probably something going on there that we need to see about addressing. So here is what I have done, advise people to do. I've done this myself. First of all, take your phone with you or something you can make notes on. It could be a piece of paper if you want, if you're old school. Go for one of those walks in the neighborhood, you know, the one your doctor keeps telling you that you get that you don't want to because the ball game's on or something. So go for a walk, write down every house that kind of looks like yours. When you get back, you go to the address on the pen, go to your township assessor, and look at each of those properties and their assessment and their square footage. A simple calculation is I'm going to divide all those properties' assessed values by their square footage, and I want to see where mine ends up. If I'm at the bottom of that, I'm going to flip my laptop closed and go on my way and never mention it again to anyone. If I'm at the top of the list, I'm going to find out why. Now, maybe there's a good reason. Maybe I'm the only one with a finished basement. Maybe I'm the only one with a 3-season room. Maybe I'm the only one with a 3-car garage. Or maybe I'm the only one with all 3. But if I can't figure out the reason, I want to see why that is the case. And a call to the township assessor is the easy way to do it. But if you're not satisfied, it's always okay to file with the Board of Review. Mentioned discrepancy in physical data, mentioned that earlier. Always okay. We get very few of those at Board of Review, mainly because most of those get settled by the assessor saying, you're right, and I'm going to submit a new assessment and put that through. Very common when that happens. The last is a preferential assessment. That's the things that I met. Things like developer lots. Developers get a special tax break. Golf course owners get a special tax break. And so when those come through and they're entitled to them and they don't have them, they'll file. They really don't come into play for single-family dwellings. So a couple of tips on filing. Number 1, file before the deadline. Every year there will be a deadline for filing, and it's going to be based on publication in the local newspaper. Why? Well, number 1, it's always been that way. Number 2, the Illinois Press Association has assured the state legislature, I was in the room when it happened, that you, the public, prefer most of your information from local newspapers. Gosh, I wouldn't have guessed that, but okay. So that's still the primary means of notification. There's also a requirement of by the way, that price for the paper, it's flat 80 cents per parcel. I can't even bid it out to multiple papers and get the best deal for them. I always wondered if there was any other sweetheart deal with a no-bid contract, if the press would jump over that, but they don't seem to be concerned about this one anyway. There is a mailed notice that is required, but only if there's a change other than equalization. Mail has been getting more troublesome as well. You probably noticed that yourself. So another thing that you would want to do is, again, go to the address on the pen. On the address on the pen, there is something that says subscribe. You click that, you enter your email address. Every time I establish for one of the townships an assessment complaint deadline for that year, I'm going to send an email out to everyone. There's going to be links in there showing where to go to get forms, where to get information, even maps where you can look up in your neighborhood and see what sale prices are, all for free. You don't need to pay someone else to do it. The majority of the people who file for houses do not use attorneys, and they get the reductions at the same or slightly better rate than attorneys do consistently year after year after year. We've designed the process to be as easy as possible. So you can do it. You don't necessarily need to come in to to file it. You can do everything through the mail. We're working on an online thing, but we're about a year away from that because there's a lot of financial information. We want to make sure everything is secure before we launch that. But when it comes to a hearing, you can request a hearing or not. If you don't, it'll be done on the written evidence, so you don't have to take time off from work unless you want to. If you do, all the hearings are done either by telephone or by Zoom. So you don't have to drive to the county building on a cold, snowy day in December, and then if you miss your hearing, you're out of luck. There's still some counties that do that. They require everyone to show up. We did it as a test during COVID, and we started asking people, and everyone loved it, and we just made it permanent, and it made life easier for everyone. So all these things can be done. If there is a reduction on your assessment, It'll take place before that next tax bill. If you don't like the result of the Board of Review, you can appeal that to the State Property Tax Appeal Board. And people do that every year, and that's okay. We never take it personally when that happens. So aside from values, property values, how do you else save? How do you make sure you have all your homestead exemption? Now, I see some of you are here with your tax bills. If you have your tax bill with you, there will be a place on the column where it shows how the calculations are, show what exemptions are there, and what has been deducted from your value before the tax rate is applied. So these are the things we're talking about. General homestead exemption. This has been around since 1977. And the general homestead exemption is up to $8,000 off of your assessed value. So that would be the equivalent of taking about $24,000 off of your market value. You get the general homestead exemption simply by living in the house that you own. How many here live in a house that you own? That's how you get it. It's only good for one residence, but all these can stack onto that one residence. Now, the next exemption is the literal granddaddy of them all, the senior citizen exemption, the very first one all the way back in 1972. And that is an additional $8,000. So if you own and occupy that house as a principal dwelling, and at least one of the owners, if you're married, you don't both need to be over 65, but at least one of you is 65 years or older by December 31st of that year, it's an additional $8,000. It doubles the tax savings. So for instance, the tax bill we just paid was for 2025. If you were 65 by December 31st, 2025, then you would qualify for that one. If you're turning 65 in 2026, apply now. It'll be on the bill before you get it next year. The next one after that is the senior citizen assessment freeze homestead exemption. This is for low-income households. Low income is defined as having a household income for last year's assessment, that would be the tax bill just paid, $65,000 or less. This year, for 2026, payable in 27, it's going up to $75,000. Then after that, $77,000. Then after that, $79,000. So it does increase from time to time, and this was something the legislature did back in November. So when I say household income, what am I talking about? Well, the form itself has most of the details, but in general, we're not just looking at taxable income. We're looking at almost all income. There are only a few exceptions. For instance, Illinois does not tax Social Security, but it's counted in this case for that number. And for who it counts is the applicant. It's also the applicant's spouse, even if the spouse does not live in the same household. I am aware of some married couples who don't live together, and maybe that's how their marriage stays together. I don't know. But we have to count whether they're living there or not. And then anyone else who's using that property as a principal dwelling. It would include their income as well. The homestead improvement exemption. This is designed to encourage homestead improvements. My wife and I built a patio. And by the way, when I say built, I mean we paid somebody. I'm not my dad. My dad would do that sort of thing. I am too old and too doughy to do that kind of work. That goes on the assessment this year, but it immediately comes back off up to $25,000 of assessed value. It'd be the same for you as well. Best part about this one, you don't even have to apply for it. When the assessor finds the new addition to the property, they take it right off at the same time. It stays off for 4 years before it becomes fully accessible. Returning veterans returning from armed combat, $5,000 a year for 2 years. Veterans with disabilities, this is a relatively new one with a wide variety of qualifications, but a veteran who owns and occupies their home as a principal dwelling and has a service-connected disability of at least 30% can qualify for something. If the service-connected disability is 70% or greater, that would be a $250,000 exemption with the max, and that would be for a home up to $70,000 $750,000 would be tax-free. The last one is the newest one, but it's the one that I think we have the greatest propensity for people who might qualify and don't know it. It's the Persons with Disabilities Homestead Exemption. It was actually brought in with the same bill that did the Veterans with Disabilities Exemption back in 2007. And it's for persons with a disability that inhibits employment. And it uses the Social Security Index, or Social Security Administration criteria for a Class 2 or Class 2A disability. And the easiest way to prove that up is to go to the Illinois Secretary of State and get a disabled person's ID card. You can find those forms on my website. I think we even have some out here in the back. I'll talk about that, the back in a little bit. I encourage that because otherwise you have to have a physician statement every year. And but the Secretary of State's card is good for 10 years. I'm not sure why the difference, but that's the way the law was written. So I like to encourage people to go to the Secretary of State's office. I had a personal encounter like that with my father-in-law. This was about 15 years ago. My father-in-law has since passed. He lived down in LaSalle County, and I'm visiting him, and he happens to mention that he went to the doctor, and he was diagnosed with severe and aggressive macular degeneration. He's going blind. And I'm feeling terrible about that, but I know that he'll qualify for this exemption. And I said, Virgil, we can go to the Secretary of State's office, we can get you a disabled person's ID card, and you can then save a little on your taxes. And he goes, oh, I already got one. I stopped on my way home from the doctor to get one. I thought that odd, and I thought, yeah, I'm finding out I'm going blind. My first thing is I need to go get this card. And so finally my curiosity got the best of me, and I said, Virgil, why did you, when finding out you're going blind, think immediately you need to go to the Secretary of State's office, you need a disabled person's ID card? And he said, well, if you have one of those cards, you can renew your gun owner card for free. Don, I don't know if you're thinking about any legislation. At the very least, we did wear orange after that every time we go to visit Grandpa's house. So that is a $2,000 exemption. So how much does this save? Well, the calculation is always going to be the amount of the exemption multiplied times the tax rate. So tax rates vary, but about in the middle of the county to be 7.5%. So a general homestead exemption is going to, at 7.5%, it's going to save you about $600. A senior exemption is going to save you another $600. So we're up to $1,200 for seniors. Senior freeze, for every $100 of value, it doesn't go up. It comes off by the exemption. We're looking at a $7.50 savings. Homestead improvement up to almost $1,900. Returning veterans, $375. Disabled veterans up to the whole bill. Person with disabilities, $150 plus that free FOID card renewal, if that's the sort of thing you like. So we are at 7:25. It's a little bit of time left. So who do I call? Well, the first thing is, if you have questions about your exemptions, I have 3 deputies who are waiting outside. I have connections into our system. We can look those up for you live. Now, you can look them up yourself if you want. Go to the address on the pen, go to the property search feature, type in your address or your name, your parcel number if you have your tax bill handy. It'll bring up your bill. It'll show what exemptions you're getting. Be sure you move it to 2026 to show current exemptions, but all that will show that. But if you're not sure or you'd like to check here, go out and see one of my deputies. They will look it up for you. If you are qualified for an exemption that you don't have, we want to get you signed up tonight. And if you qualified for it last year, we can still get last year's tax bill adjusted. We have a short window for that. It's up till October 1st. But every time I've had one of these, at least one person has walked out, has had a lower tax bill than they came in with just because of a homestead exemption missing. But if you have further information about assessed values, you want to talk to your township assessor because they're the ones who develop the assessed values. If you need more information about exemptions, you can see my team outside, or you can give my office a call at your convenience. You're always welcome to walk into it in the office in Geneva. But there's no need to go there unless you really want to go there and go up to the back of a government center and up a sometimes functioning elevator. And I know, don't even want to talk about that Building A elevator. But you're always welcome, but you can always give us a call. For assessment complaints, the Board of Review is in the same office as mine. If you have questions about taxing body levies, the county clerk, you look right on the back, you can see a phone number for the county clerk as well as their website. Tax bills would always go to the questions about that, go to the county treasurer, which is also on the back of that.